The truck smashed through my ranch gate just after sunrise. Gravel flew as 4 men jumped out, shouting about emergency wildfire compliance and rushing my pump shed like it already belonged to them. One flashed a fake badge and ordered me to step back while they seized my water system. Rex moved first. He wasn't a pet. He was a trained, working K9. When one man stepped too close, Rex lunged low and fast teeth snapping inches from his leg. Rex down. He stopped instantly. I didn't raise my voice again. I didn't touch the shotgun leaning against my porch. Sunlight filled the valley. Neighbors could see everything. That was the point. Force looks official in daylight. Then Rex froze. Ears locked toward the road. Engines were coming. Heavy. Fast. One man smirked. Relax. Backup's here. Rex growled. Because whatever was coming wasn't theirs, and the woman who sent them had just made a very public mistake. She arrived an hour later, once the trucks had cleared out and the dust had settled. Not rushing. Not flustered. A metallic emerald Mercedes SUV rolled up my dirt drive like it didn't care about rocks or ranch roads, the paint catching sunlight in a way that made it impossible to ignore. She parked it diagonally across my gate, flashy, deliberate, then stepped out in tailored slacks and dark sunglasses, heels sinking slightly into the gravel. No greeting, no introduction. She pointed at my pump shed and said, "That system is going to get someone killed if you don't comply." That was how Marla Kessich operated. Command first, explanation later. She claimed to manage a regional wildfire safety authority, a name polished enough to scare property owners who didn't know better. She spoke in clipped phrases about emergency corridors, community risk exposure, and temporary seizure powers, each sentence ending with an implied threat. Insurance flags, county action, forced shutdowns. She never showed paperwork. When I asked who granted her authority, she smiled, like the question itself was offensive. "We coordinate with the county," she said, careful not to say for the county. Her eyes drifted to my dog, my porch, my land, weighing options. Her motive surfaced quickly. Compliance meant signing a brief agreement, granting her team access to my water infrastructure until further notice. No expiration, no appeal, just control. She warned that non-compliant ranches tended to develop problems, fires, vandalism, liability, nightmares no insurer would touch. As she turned back to her Mercedes, she added casually, "I'd hate for this place to get flagged." Then she drove off, confident intimidation would finish the job. It didn't. The pressure didn't start with threats. It started with interruptions. 2 days after Marla Kessich drove off in her emerald Mercedes, a pickup I didn't recognize idled outside my fence line while I was checking cattle. No logos, no plates I could see. The driver never got out. Just sat there, engine running, watching the pump shed through binoculars, until Rex stood up and fixed him with that stare. The truck left immediately. That afternoon, a laminated notice appeared zip-tied to my gate. No letterhead, no seal. Just bold text warning that non-compliant wildfire water systems may be subject to emergency intervention. No phone number, no appeal process. Just a deadline: 72 hours. I cut it down and tossed it. The next morning, my insurance agent called, asking why a regional wildfire safety authority had flagged my property as a risk exposure. She didn't know who filed it, only that it existed and had triggered a review. That's when I understood the play. Marla wasn't trying to scare me directly. She was trying to make the system do it for her. By sunset, Rex had tracked fresh boot prints along the tree line near the access road. Human, recent, not ranch hands, not hikers. Someone had walked the perimeter, stopped near the pump shed, and left the same way they came, quiet, deliberate. This wasn't harassment yet. It was positioning. The real escalation came wrapped in paperwork. An envelope arrived by courier, not mail. Inside was a temporary compliance directive, demanding I grant immediate access to my water infrastructure for wildfire readiness assessment. It cited state statutes, real ones, but twisted just enough to sound legitimate to someone who didn't read law for a living. I did. The directive had no case number, no issuing agency, no enforcement signature. Fake. I called the county fire office. They'd never heard of Marla Kessich. I called the state wildfire board. Same answer. When I finally reached a clerk at the county assessor's office, she hesitated, then admitted 3 other ranches in the valley had been flagged the same way in the last month. 2 of them had already signed. That night, Rex went rigid on the porch just before dusk. Not barking, not pacing, locked. Head toward the pump shed. I grabbed binoculars and saw movement, 2 figures this time, ducking low near the water tanks. When Rex growled, they bolted, disappearing into the trees like they'd rehearsed the escape route. I didn't chase, I documented everything. Because by then, this wasn't about one woman in a Mercedes. It was about a pattern. The sabotage hit before dawn. Rex woke me with a bark I'd only heard a handful of times in 20 years. Sharp, urgent, wrong. By the time I reached the pump shed, the smell told me everything. Diesel. Someone had dumped fuel into the primary Wildfire reservoir, the one tied directly to my livestock supply and emergency suppression system. The intake filters were ruined. The pump was seized. If I'd activated it during a real fire, I would have spread fuel instead of water. That wasn't vandalism. That was endangerment. I shut the system down and rerouted what I could, hands shaking as the cost ran through my head. Repairs alone would be 5 figures. Losing water access during fire season could make the ranch uninsurable, unlivable. And that's when Marla called. Her voice was calm, pleasant even. "I heard you're having trouble with your water," she said. "This is exactly why cooperation matters." She offered a solution, sign the compliance agreement, grant her team control of the system, and she'd stabilize the situation before anyone else got hurt. I looked at Rex standing between me and the pump shed, eyes locked on the trees where the intruders had vanished. That was the moment I understood the truth. This wasn't about safety. It was about forcing surrender. And whatever came next wasn't going to stay quiet. I didn't answer Marla's call. Instead, I walked the perimeter with Rex as the sun climbed, documenting everything. The diesel contamination wasn't sloppy. It was precise. Someone had bypassed the outer lock, removed the intake cover, poured fuel directly where it would cause maximum damage, then resealed it just enough that I might not notice until it was too late. That meant 2 things. 1, this wasn't random muscle. 2, they knew exactly how my system worked. By noon, I had confirmation. A local pump technician I trusted took one look and said the same thing. I was already thinking this wasn't sabotage for intimidation. This was sabotage designed to force dependence. The repair timeline alone would put me out of compliance with fire insurance standards. Lose insurance, lose the ranch. That's when I pulled county property records. Buried in a recent filing, Quiet Technical, was a proposed wildfire access easement expansion running straight through my land. If the easement passed, whoever controlled the emergency water corridor would control my pump shed, my reservoir, and the only service road connecting the North Valley. Marla hadn't come for compliance. She'd come for leverage. And the water attack wasn't punishment, it was step 2. I called Sheriff Miller before Marla could call me again. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. He listened while I laid everything out. Timelines, documentation, footage from my trail cameras, the fake directives, the contaminated reservoir, the easement filing. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, "You're the 4th ranch this month." That changed everything. Miller told me they'd been tracking a group impersonating Wildfire. Authorities moving county to county, targeting isolated properties with valuable water rights or strategic access points. The pattern was always the same: paperwork, pressure, insurance flags, sabotage, then a solution that handed over control. What they'd been missing was a clean, on-site confrontation. "Don't engage her again alone," he said. "If she comes back, call me. And don't fix the pump yet." That last part surprised me. "Leave it broken," he added. "Let them think the pressure worked." So I did. I rerouted water temporarily, for the cattle shut down the visible system, and waited. Rex stayed close, closer than usual. Animals know when a line has been crossed. The convoy came 3 days later, not sneaking this time, not at night, mid-morning, clear skies, full visibility. Marla's emerald Mercedes led the way, followed by 3 heavy-duty pickups. They rolled straight through my open gate like they'd already decided the outcome. She stepped out, smiling, clipboard in hand, confidence back in her posture. "This doesn't have to get complicated," she said loudly. The men with her spread out, one toward the pump, shed another toward the barn, 2 more hanging back like backup muscle. No uniforms, no insignia, just presence. She announced an emergency intervention under Wildfire authority and ordered me to step aside while her team secured the water system for the safety of the valley. I told her no. She didn't argue. Instead, she nodded to one of the men and said, "Document non-compliance." That's when Rex moved. Not lunging, not barking, just stepping forward enough to redraw the line. The men hesitated. They'd seen him before. Marla's patience snapped. "If you obstruct this process," she said, "you're creating liability for everyone. We'll take control with or without your cooperation." That was it. That was the moment she crossed from intimidation into felony territory. I pulled out my phone and said calmly, "This property is under my control. You are trespassing. Leave now." She laughed. And then too casually, too confident, she said the words that ended her. "We already have authorization. The sheriff won't interfere." Rex growled. Low, certain, and from the road behind them, the sound of engines answered him. Not pickups, cruisers, multiple, fast. Marla turned confused as red and blue lights cut across the valley and closed the gate she'd just driven through. The men with her stiffened, because suddenly, this wasn't an inspection anymore. It was a crime scene. The first cruiser stopped sideways across my gate, blocking Marla's Mercedes in before she could even think about leaving. Two more slid in behind it, red and blue lights washing over the pasture, the pump shed, the men, everything. Doors opened in sync. Deputies stepped out, slow and deliberate, hands visible but ready. Marla recovered fast. I'll give her that. She walked toward Sheriff Miller like she'd been expecting him, clipboard held out, voice raised just enough for the deputies and my neighbors gathering at their fences to hear. This property is under emergency wildfire intervention, she said. You're interfering with an authorized operation. Miller didn't take the clipboard. He looked past her, scanned the pump shed, the trucks, the men spread out like hired props, then turned to me. Did you authorize any of this? No, I said. That was it. Miller faced Marla again. Then you're standing on private property without consent. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand the urgency. This system is non-compliant. If there's a fire, he cut in calm, the county responds. Not you. The air shifted. The men behind her stopped moving. Rex stayed planted at my side eyes, never leaving them. Marla tried one last time to push forward. We have authority, she said sharply. This ranch is a risk. Miller nodded once. Let's talk about that. Miller raised his hand, and one deputy stepped forward with a tablet. Trail cam footage, the deputy said, taken 2 nights ago, shows 2 of your associates accessing the pump shed. Another deputy spoke up. We've got samples from the reservoir. Diesel contamination, intentional. Marla opened her mouth, then closed it. Miller didn't stop. We ran your organization, he continued. No registration, no county contract, no state authorization. And this, he tapped the tablet, is a proposed easement filing tied to a shell entity you control. Her confidence started to crack. She tried to laugh it off. This is a misunderstanding. We coordinate wildfire safety. Everyone knows that. That's the problem, Miller said. They think they know that because you told them. One of the men behind her shifted nervously. Another looked straight at the ground. Miller stepped closer. You impersonated an authority. You sabotaged a water system. You brought armed civilians onto private land and attempted seizure under false pretenses. Marla snapped, sharp and defensive. You can't prove intent. Miller nodded toward me. You want to tell her what she said earlier? I didn't raise my voice. She said the sheriff wouldn't interfere, I said, because she already had authorization. Silence. That line hung there heavy. Marla's eyes flicked to the deputies. Too late. Miller exhaled slowly. Ma'am, he said, turn around and put your hands behind your back. Her face went pale. This is insane. You're overreacting. No, he said, cuffing her wrists. You escalated. The deputies moved fast after that. The men were separated, questioned, phones taken. One of them started talking almost immediately, pointing at Marla, words tumbling out like he'd been waiting for permission. Neighbors stood frozen along the fence line, watching the whole thing unfold in full daylight. Rex finally relaxed, but only slightly. Marla was guided toward the cruiser heels, slipping in the gravel she'd ignored when she arrived. As she passed me, she tried to say something. Anger, blame, I couldn't tell. I didn't respond. The gate that had been forced open for intimidation closed again under the weight of real authority. And for the first time since she drove onto my land, Marla Kessich wasn't in control of anything at all. No one spoke for a long moment after the cruisers pulled Marla away. The valley felt different, lighter, like something toxic had finally burned off in the sun. Neighbors who'd been watching from behind fences started walking closer, cautious at first, then bolder when they realized it was truly over. Tom from the west side shook his head and muttered. So it wasn't just me and an older couple I barely knew admitted they'd signed paperwork months ago just to make the threats stop. Rex sat at my heel, calm now, his job done, but his attention still on the road. I rested a hand on his shoulder without thinking. For weeks I'd been bracing, listening for engines, watching tree lines, sleeping light. That tension drained all at once, leaving behind a quiet I hadn't felt since before Marla's Mercedes ever turned onto my drive. People apologized. Not for anything specific, just for staying silent, for assuming someone else would handle it, for believing the word authority without asking who it belonged to. I didn't hold it against them. That silence was exactly what Marla had been counting on. Sheriff Miller gathered everyone near the pump shed, his voice steady, grounding the moment. If you were contacted by her organization, he said, we need statements. Today. Heads nodded. Phones came out. For the first time, the valley wasn't fractured into isolated properties. It was standing in one place together. Miller put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. A county prosecutor confirmed the charges moving forward: impersonation of authority, conspiracy, felony vandalism, attempted unlawful seizure of infrastructure, and fraud tied to wildfire compliance filings. The scope was bigger than my ranch, mid-six figures in damages and extorted fees spread across multiple properties, enough to justify state-level charges and possibly federal review. Miller explained what would happen next without turning it into a lecture. Evidence logged, water samples secured, phones seized, the easement filing frozen. No property could be reclassified, accessed, or temporarily seized without written consent, third-party verification, and a public record trail. That rule would be formalized, effective immediately. One deputy handed me a printed notice, confirming that my water system was officially recognized as privately controlled emergency infrastructure, protected from unilateral intervention. Insurance flags cleared, compliance threats voided. The shotgun stayed on the porch untouched. It didn't need to do anything to matter. The law had finally shown up and done its job. Miller looked at me before heading back to his cruiser. "You did exactly what you were supposed to," he said. "You held your ground long enough for us to prove it." As the deputies wrapped up, people drifted back to their properties, talking in low, relieved voices. The crisis didn't end with a cheer. It ended with something better: normalcy. I walked back toward the pump shed with Rex, the sun now high enough to glint off the steel like it always had. The system was still broken. That would take time and money. But it was mine again, and no one was standing between me and the work ahead. I shut the gate Marla had rolled through so confidently that morning. The latch clicked into place with a sound that felt final. Rex circled once, satisfied, then settled in the shade like nothing extraordinary had happened. To him, this was just another perimeter secured. Before going inside, I looked out across the pasture, neighbors moving cattle, grazing the valley, breathing easy again. Marla had tried to use fear, paperwork, and muscle to take control of something that was never hers. She failed because she chose the wrong ground. Out here, authority isn't claimed. It's proven slowly, legally, and in full daylight. And once that line is held, it doesn't move.